Good day, everyone, and welcome to It's Never Too Late to Be Healthy podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brady. Today, I'm super excited to introduce our guest, Nicolette Richer. Nicolette and I, our paths have crossed a few times, but most recently through our association in Whistler, and more importantly, her, I'll say, vegan and super healthy restaurant slash juicery called the Green Moustache, which is one of the topics we actually go through in today's podcast. Nicolette is very much on the path of plant-based nutrition, and her book, Eat Real to Heal, is amazing. I encourage everyone and anyone to read that book if you're interested in healing and leading a healthier life. And one of the things that I found is personally, my nutrition over the years hadn't been very good, and it was one of the major factors in my healing. And I wish I had picked up her book a number of years ago, because it really, as soon as I dialed in my nutrition in a healthy way, literally within a few weeks, I was much healthier, and my blood tests turned around, and I've never looked back since. Some of the things you'll hear about today in today's podcast is Nicolette's origin story, her background, again, her restaurant, Green Moustache, and how that's transformed and now is opening 10 new restaurants in the near future. We really get into a discussion about the body's ability to heal, and that our bodies really want to heal, which again is my message and my story in my book. And she talks about her 22 Million Strong, which is an amazing initiative, which you have to hear about, and her ride across Canada, which I know she's super excited about. We talk about the dispelling myths around sugar and diabetes, and again, a real strong message around that. There's a therapy called the Gerson therapy, which has been known to, I'll say, stop cancer and reverse cancer in its tracks. So I know many of you will be excited to hear about that. And Nicolette and I also have a lot in common in terms of fitness. And her coach that she's using right now for her ride across Canada is Chris Hout, who is one of my idols, and I listen to him regularly as well. So again, I think you'll love today's podcast. Nicolette's just a treat, and just so passionate about changing the world. And I love the fact that every single day she's waking up to help people lead longer, healthier, and more energetic lives. I hope you enjoy today's podcast. Great, Nicolette, it's so great to have you on the show today. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, Kevin. This is wonderful.
Yeah, and we had a little pre-discussion just before the podcast, and you mentioned you're just in the middle of a move. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, I always forget how much work it is to move, and it was an amazing workout. So that's how I've been looking at it, and super excited to be in our new home.
Awesome. So let me ask you before we get into the rest of the podcast. So you've just mentioned you've had a great workout because you've been moving. How's it been for your mind?
Oh, you know what? It was actually quite stressful because we downsized and we sold our wellness center, that we've had people coming from all over the, North America, and even guests from Europe coming to it. So that was a little sad to let that go. But being in the midst of COVID, we realized our family just wanted to spend more time together and not, taking care of a huge property. And we already have the plant-based restaurant, so we get all our organic, produce fresh from the farms anyway. So we were like, why are we trying to grow food and run plant-based whole food restaurants? And so, so it's been, ups and downs for sure with letting one business go. But then the upside is I get to spend all of this incredible time with my family.
Awesome.
And not run around like, chickens with our heads cut off, so to speak.
Yeah, that's, so important, especially I think a lot of people, especially during the last year, have come to that realization, right? Like what matters is family, is spending time with family. And a lot of people have done exactly what you just did. A lot of people have relocated and gone, rethought their life, I guess I would put it. So congratulations on that.
Yeah,
So
thank you. Yeah, it was a big step, but definitely the right step. And we're so excited for, what the years ahead bring to us.
yeah, good.
Yeah.
I thought I'd start just by sharing a little story of how you and I kind of connected, because it's when I think of it, I think it's crazy because although we've just fairly recently met, I feel like I've known you for a long time. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to start out just sharing kind of the story of what brought us together, because I always think my belief is things in life happen for a reason, right?
Yeah.
So for our listeners, many of you may know we've got a place out in Whistler, and we've been going out there as a family for, I don't know, 15 or 20 years now. And we've had two different places out there, but both places where there was a strip mall across the street called Village Marketplace. And in there was a restaurant that was called the Green Moustache. And that is Nicolette's restaurant. And just out of interest, how many years, when did you open that restaurant? Because that's,
It's been 7.5 years now. It's gone
oh,
by so
wow.
fast.
Holy
Yeah.
smokes. Wow.
Yeah.
So I was going to guess, I thought it for sure 5, but I wasn't sure if it was 10. So 7.5 years. So when the Green Mustache opened, our family, of course, being plant-based, that became our go-to place. And the fact that it was across the street, literally a 5-minute walk, we could go and have our, fresh juices, fresh shakes, fresh produce, everything we wanted was right there. And I remember the first time I went in there, I kind of looked around. I thought, this is a cool place. Like I'd like to meet whoever the owner of this is. And then I started looking, and up above, you probably, and I'm sure they're still there, because the books, you had books, and one of the books was Finding Ultra by Rich Roll.
Yeah.
And Rich, of course, is a good friend of mine and one of my mentors, and I'll say probably the single most important person in kind of my health transformation for myself and my family. And it was a signed copy up on the shelf. Well, anyways, not knowing you, I took a picture of that and I sent it to Rich, right? And I've even, of course, offered our place to Rich to stay at our place. But I sent, and he responded right away. He goes, "Oh, love that place." So I don't even know if you know, he's been in your restaurant, right?
Oh my, that's so funny because he's been influential in my life as well. And in so many ways, I mean, I was already plant-based way before I think Rich discovered, food as medicine and for healing. So, but it was more from the athletic side. So that's where he influenced me tremendously, was the
Yeah,
movement side. So, he's
cool.
helped so many, like millions of people. Yeah, love that
Oh
guy and
yeah,
his
yeah.
family.
He's awesome. So this, and to fast forward, so of course, Green Mustache, Green Mustache, Green Mustache, every single time we're in Whistler, and not once, like multiple days in a row, where it's just our go-to place. Well, so my wife went over this past Christmas when we were there, and she came home with Eat Real to Heal, right? And anyways, I kind of stole it from her side of the night table, and I read it. And I thought, this book like is amazing, and it's so on the same page as me and my thinking and everything we're trying to promote and everything else. So I read it, and then actually it was so good, I read it again. So I read it like twice. And then I don't even know if you remember, you probably got this random email, because I thought, I'm gonna look Nicolette up. So I looked you up and I sent you you have a place where you can put an email or comments. And I thought, I'll never hear back. You do these things, you reach out and you never hear back. Well, lo and behold, you sent me a note back and said, yeah, I'd love to connect. And that's really what brought us together. So again, so glad you could join us today. And I just love everything you're doing. And for our listeners, as you heard in my introduction, I mean, there's busy, and then there's ultra busy and ultra accomplishment. And I always think I do a lot, and people say to me, Kevin, you do a lot. I feel like I'm in nursery school when I when I look at all the things you're doing. So congratulations on that, because literally you are
Thanks.
helping people, and I'll say changing the world every single day. So on behalf of our listeners, thank you for that.
Oh, thanks so much. And it's I'm going to pause. I'm going to take a lesson from somebody else I just had a meeting with, and who, when they give compliments or they receive compliments, they really take time to internalize them and to accept them. Where normally I'm so used to blowing past them and saying, yeah, thanks, but it's because with all that we're doing, I still feel like we're not doing enough because of the fact that, the chronic disease epidemic is upon us and there's so much more work to do. But I do want to acknowledge you and your kind words and say thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point in terms of acknowledgement because I feel the same thing every day. Like we're trying to get to here, and we're just and it seems like such baby steps. But one of my mentors, and I'll just share this because I think it's great for everyone because it's really helped me. But one of my mentors is a guy named Dan Sullivan who runs a company called Strategic Coach, who I've been going to for over 20 years, and a personal friend and mentor. But he has an exercise that he calls, and it's the 25-year plan. And the reason I like the 25-year plan is because you can look 25 years out, and it takes that rush out of everything. It's like, oh, I don't have to get that done today. I've got a lot of time here to get things done, and it's almost like gives you time to relax. And not that you want to wait till 24 years to start everything, but it's just mentally, it's just a good exercise. So I share that with you. So instead of thinking I got to get this done, think 25 years out, which, I know your goals are a lot more aggressive than that, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, but just a good exercise. So
I'm going
Nicolette,
to implement that 25-year
25-year
plan for sure. Because already I could feel my shoulders just settle a little bit and say, it's okay. It doesn't have to be done by tomorrow. So thank you for that. Yeah, I'm definitely going to share that with our group and our listeners as well.
Great. So let me tell you or ask you, and I've read your book, so I do know some of your background, but what I'd like to do is just ask for, how you got involved in this whole, I'll say, plant-based movement and nutrition heals, and every single thing we put in our mouth on a daily basis matters. Like, was it a life-turning event, or was it kind of just over time? Just love you to share your story with our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, the reality for sure is that it was over time. I love to, say that, oh, it was one moment, like when I watched Forks Over Knives, or when I watched, everyone usually references that. But for me, it actually goes back, 25 years was a pivotal moment for me, for sure. A friend of mine, her dad was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. He was given 3 months to live, and he wasn't offered any other conventional treatment. And I was in the environmental sector. So I was, really, everyone called me a hippie and I wanted to save the planet. And, meanwhile, here's my friend's dad who has cancer. And I really knew nothing about cancer, or the fact that it could be arrested or, literally flipped up like a switch and reversed. And I just thought it was, either a death sentence, or you went through aggressive treatment and you cross your fingers and hopefully survived. And so he wasn't offered any treatment, and he ended up switching to a plant-based whole food therapy called the Gerson therapy. And of course, at the time, I didn't know who this Dr. Max Gerson was. And we just watched him, eat his food, and he'd always walk around with a cooler of his own food. And we ate pretty well. Like I, grew up eating vegetables. I was born in Malawi, Africa. We grew our own food, ate our own food. And, we didn't have access to refined processed food. And when we came to Canada, my mom had a garden. So I was used to having meals made from scratch and not a lot of refined products. But, we ate meat, we ate dairy, we ate, and a lot more things started creeping into our life the longer we were in Canada. So when Bill switched his diet, it was hard to tell from looking at the food how it was different, but it was fundamentally different because it didn't contain any sodium. It didn't contain any extra refined oils. It didn't contain any refined sugars, tons of potatoes and squash, and like an abundance of produce. And he ended up reversing his cancer entirely, and he lived another 22 years. But when he started this, when he was first diagnosed, he was 72 years old. So he wasn't a spring chicken doing this. Like, he was somebody who had grown up eating, meat and steaks and potatoes and lots of, beer at the time when he used to drink. And he really just changed his lifestyle, and he changed his mindset as well. And he put himself and his health first, and he reversed his cancer entirely. And passed away at 94. His wife did the program with him, and she's still rocking. And this woman is in her 90s, and she flies all over the world, like pre-COVID, and still carries on a lot of the work that he was doing. And she's in her 90s, but she even looked 20 years younger after this year of doing this therapy. So that completely transformed my entire worldview. It was like a massive paradigm shift. And I started to question everything that we knew about lifestyle diseases, chronic diseases. And that set me on a whole new path. And it was really that intersection of the environmental work that I was doing and policy development work I was doing in government, and then looking at human health from a nutrition standpoint, and then seeing these two worlds like really intersect. And then that was it for me. Like I took the leap and started training in this therapy and coaching people. And then they all started reversing their aggressive diseases. And that was it. That's when life changed.
That's amazing story. And, again, part because we're on the same page, but we see that regularly as well, where people just, reverse their stage 3 or stage 2 or stage 4 cancer simply by changing mainly diet, but diet
Yeah.
and lifestyle, I'll call it. And it's amazing. And it's great to see. And I'm sure, you have story after story of that type of thing, and people you've helped as well. Are there, that's a great story. I mean, the fact that he lived another 20, I think you said 20 or 22 years,
22.
22 years. That's crazy. And just through that protocol. And I wanted to ask you, like, and again, for our listeners, because a lot of them have heard of the Gerson therapy, but can you kind of give us a high level of what that's about? Like what,
Yeah.
if you were to describe it, would you mind just kind of diving into that a bit?
Yeah, definitely. Because there's a lot of misconceptions around it as well. A lot of people think it's a juicing program, and I'm absolutely against juice cleanses because we need the abundance of fiber. We need the abundance of, other nutrients that, sometimes get lost in juicing. But I mean, juicing is wonderful, but juicing is only one of the 4 components of the program. The main, most important part of the program is all the food. So the food is plant-based, it's whole foods. There's nothing refined. There's absolutely no refined oils other than flax oil. And flax oil is actually used as a medication, which that's how important it is in the program. But it's not used for the entire life of the program. And so we wean people off of it after a few months, or at least take it down a bit. And then, of course, the food is cooked in a certain way. So there's a lot of, raw foodists out there who think that, the way to stop an aggressive disease or reverse it is to go completely raw. And in the case of most of my clients and the people who do Gerson, their diseases are so advanced that they don't have the digestive capacity to digest raw food. So it's actually the cooked foods on the program, which are incredibly powerful and healing. So there's the cooked foods. For sure, you can have raw foods, as much of them as you want, but the cooked meals are important. You have 3 meals a day. Then you would add the juices to it. And depending if I have a client who has type 2 diabetes or type 1 diabetes or an autoimmune disorder or, asthma, eczema, psoriasis, infertility, we might start someone who doesn't have as aggressive of a disease or a time stamp on their disease. We might start them off with 3 juices a day. And they're just 8-ounce juices. It's none of these big gulps and, massive juices that everybody's purchasing. And then and for somebody who has a more advanced disease, they would go up to 13 juices a day, every hour on the hour. And it's sort of like taking your medicine. The nurse would come in, wake you up at 2 a.m. and say, you need your next dose of medicine. And there's a reason for it. It's because we don't want the disease to get ahead of the medication and the treatment. But it's the same thing with the Gerson therapy. We need to make sure your cells are taking in all of the right nutrients before the disease has a chance to progress. So that's why the juices are really important, because they're like an IV transfusion of medicine, nutrients directly into the bloodstream, but without having to compromise your already weak digestive system. And then there's 2 more components. According to Dr. Max Gerson, and that would be a supplement protocol, because no matter how well you eat, you just can't get all of your missing nutrients from the food alone. And so these supplements are not the kinds of things you can buy in a health food store or, your local pharmacy. These are specific compounded supplements that come from a compounding pharmacy. We also treat them like a medication, and they're used therapeutically, so in high doses for a short amount of time. And they're meant to build up your organs, so then your organs can actually start assimilating the nutrients on their own from the food. So it's only that stepping stone to get your body back to health, so it can start self-healing. And then the last component of the therapy is the liver detox, which anybody who knows about the therapy will know that it's in the form of coffee enemas. And this is meant to trigger the liver to help it in detoxifying, because once you switch over to a any kind of healthy regime, what's going to happen is your own body is going to start releasing a ton of waste, not just environmental external toxins, but also your own metabolic waste. And so we need to support the liver so the liver doesn't have to undergo any more burden from this mass detoxification. And so those are the coffee enemas. And then, of course, Dr. Max Gerson knew the importance of sleep. But what happens is we don't emphasize it as much, because when you switch to this therapy or our Eat Real to Heal program, which is a simpler form, then what happens is you just naturally sleep really well at night. And then, of course, mindfulness is another important factor that Dr. Gerson talks about. We talk about, you talk about it. It needs to be incorporated into any program that you do. And this is where, you know, your mindset really is important as well when doing it. So when you combine all of these things, I mean, it almost is like a miracle, but it is amazing to see the human body just bounce back, start to self-heal, and really it can overcome 97% of the chronic diseases that are out there.
That's crazy. And do you mainly are you treating cancer patients or all types, or just people that just want to get healthy?
Yeah, we see all types of people, but I'll have to say most individuals who come to me, they've tried everything else. So they have, you know, tried acupuncture and Reiki and all different types of diets, paleo, keto, juicing, all kinds of cleanses for different organ systems. And most people, you know, they've gone down the medical route, they've gone down the surgery route, the medications didn't work, their diabetes still advanced, and they need, you know, potential amputation coming up in a few months, or a triple bypass surgery. So most people have thought they've tried everything, and then they come to me. And so I mostly see people who have chronic illnesses that are not cancer. Cancer is a chronic degenerative disease. And the reason for that is most people, when they get diagnosed with cancer, it's like you're on a train and you're being treated. So when I do see people, it's often when I'm seeing them when their cancer's returned and they've gone through the regiment of, you know, aggressive cancer treatment and it didn't work. And, you know, now they're looking for other options, or in the meantime, they've learned that diet is responsible for, you know, 90 to 95% of your disease. So that's when they're willing to address their diet, because it is a hard thing to do. We live in
Yeah.
a society where, you know, food is marketed at us, you know, and diets are marketed at us. And it's hard to understand which, you know, food program to go down. You know, should I be vegetarian, plant-based, vegan, whole food, SOS free? What is it? And so most people will then, you know, realize that actually just plain, straight, clean eating, organic food eaten in abundance is the way to go. And that's ultimately what the Gerson therapy is. So then,
It's
um,
when you actually think of it, it's pretty simple, isn't it? It's just whole food, plant-based, right? It's pretty, like, people often get asked, well, what do you mean by that? And I go,
yeah,
did it come from the ground? Is it, if it's processed, it's not whole, right? It's pretty
yeah.
simple. Like, just think of what you just moved from a farm, and all your produce is grown on a farm, right? And it's whole food, plant-based, pretty simple. And
Simple, but I'll have to say, not like for you and I, it's simple because we've gone through this, you know, scaffolding of learning, right? Where, you know, every week and every year that goes by, we learn a little bit more. And the problem is for some of our, you know, and I know this from our guests that come to our retreat center, I have them cooking in the kitchen and they'll hold up a cabbage or a leek or a potato and they've never seen one before in their life. They don't know what to do with it. They don't know if they should eat it raw or cooked or chop it or peel it. You know, they have no idea. So it is complicated, I think, for someone who's grown up on a lot of packaged processed food. And definitely it is so simple. It's crazy. It's true. Like you can walk out to a garden and eat anything out of it. And that would essentially be the Gerson therapy or any other plant-based whole food therapy. But for a lot of people, sometimes they ask me, like, is it safe to eat that many vegetables? They don't know. They've
yeah,
never
yeah.
seen half of them before.
Yeah. And part of my concern is with this whole, I'll say, vegan movement, right? As you know, you can be a very unhealthy vegan. Like, it scares me that you can go and get, vegan burgers and without mentioning names, or Oreo cookies are vegan, or chips are vegan, or,
Yeah.
like there's that people mistakenly think, oh, it's vegan. But meanwhile, if you look at the ingredient list, it's highly processed, right?
Yeah.
So
Or people think just because it's organic, just because organic or whole is written on the food, on the package, then they also think that that's okay as well. And I have many people say, well, isn't, organic whole wheat pasta that's vegan now, it's sometimes labeled as, isn't that healthy? And it's a refined food that's meant to be shelf stable. And if anything can live on a shelf for more than, let's say a week, chances are it's not going to be good for you.
Yeah, for sure. Now, let me, thanks for sharing all about the Gerson therapy. That's amazing. And so do you stick to that protocol per se, or have you kind of adapted, the learnings from that for your own consumers or patients, I'll call them?
Yeah, I love that you asked that question. For myself personally, I, do elements of all of those components. So, for example, the liver detox I'll do when I start to feel, if I start to feel myself having trouble remembering somebody's name, and I've haven't really had brain fog, but I know what brain fog could feel like. So if I start to get any signs of that, I would do a liver detox 100%. Definitely take supplements. Always my family takes them. And these are the ones that everybody, whether you're a meat eater or not, should be taking. And then of course the diet, like always 100% organic, always whole food. And every once in a while I might eat, you know, a few chips here and there, or, if I go to somebody's house and they have a dessert, like, of course I'm going to take a bite or two, depending on like what the ingredients are. But for my clients, they will, if I'm working with somebody who their goal is to reverse their disease, get off their medications, cancel an upcoming surgery, they would do all four components of the Gerson therapy. And I will not work with somebody who's not willing to do the liver detox, the coffee enema, because we know that you can put your liver under more stress when you do a cleanse or a detox. So I'm not going to take any responsibility for working with somebody who's not willing to support their liver, because it's the most important organ. And I have some clients who don't want to do the supplements. They don't like swallowing pills. And it definitely makes it a little bit more challenging, because we need to build up all organ systems simultaneously so we can activate that self-healing of the body. So some clients may not do that, and we have seen incredible results just with the food and the juicing alone. And then most of my clients, like I said, if they don't have an aggressive disease where a surgery or an aggressive medication treatment is being offered to them, and they really want to reverse their disease, then they can do the minimal version, which is the eat real to heal version, which would be 3 juices a day, all the food, and the liver detox and some of the supplements.
Yeah, excellent. And for our listeners, again, and we'll put this in the show notes, but Eat Real to Heal, the book has a bunch of recipes in it as well. I've even earmarked a few myself. So,
Nice.
but I love that. And let me ask you, and then we'll switch gears a bit, but obviously there's naysayers out there. And I'll say there's people in our communities, there's those that just say, well, no, I don't believe that. And even in the medical community, I hate to say it, so can you share, just if you have a story about that, or how you've combated that, because I'm sure you hear it regularly with your protocol.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have thousands of stories, but I'll share one that's pretty recent, and it's a client, and he's super healthy guy out in the backcountry all the time. He manages all of our avalanche systems in the Sea to Sky corridor, and he was diagnosed with colon cancer. And super, super fit guy, super lean, had a pretty, like, a quotation marks around the word healthy lifestyle, what he thought was healthy, and diagnosed with colon cancer. And so I took him on as a client. I went through and taught him the entire protocol and taught the family how to cook, everything. And then he went to his oncologist, and, we're not against chemo, surgery, radiation, medications. If you don't have any other options, those are most likely going to be a pretty good option until you find an alternative. Doing nothing is often, like I say, that's a no-no. You have to do something, whether it's going to be meditation, praying, chemo, or, change your diet and change your lifestyle, which is ultimately the best thing to do, is change your diet and lifestyle. So he went and saw his oncologist and told him and said, I'm going to be doing this therapy. And meanwhile, we had a medical team, a Gerson doctor who's a medically trained medical doctor who's also trained in the Gerson therapy. It's 2-year certification to do that for physicians. And, the oncologist said, don't bother changing your diet, wrote this in his oncology report, which then the oncologist sends to me and my client and said, your diet has nothing to do with your disease, which is criminal given the fact that there are not just hundreds, but thousands of published journal articles for the last almost 200 years that show that diet has everything to do with chronic disease and cancer. And so said diet has nothing to do with your disease. And one of the largest studies just came out regarding colon cancer, where it's an epidemiological study. They looked at the diets of tens of thousands of individuals from all around the world and saw that colon cancer is directly linked to your diet. If you eat a meat-based, animal fat-based diet, high protein from animal source diet, you have an increased chance of getting colon cancer. And it's not just increased by a little bit, but it's a lot. And sorry, I don't have the stats right now. I don't want to share anything that's, off by a few percentage points. But they looked at populations that predominantly ate fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, fresh grains, legumes, pulses, beans, and showed a remarkable decrease in colon cancer. So, and this was all attributed to the microbiome. So if you create a microbiome that loves meat, you have a higher chance of getting cancer. If you create a microbiome that loves all the fresh produce, you have a decreased chance of getting colon cancer. So meanwhile, this oncologist writes that your diet has nothing to do with cancer. And so he went on and he did the Gerson therapy and he did do chemo. Which he needed to do because his cancer was so advanced. And in this case, we need to buy time. So your health is like a runway, right? And a plane needs a long runway to be able to take off safely. If it's too short, the plane just can't get enough speed and can't take off. So your health is exactly the same way. We need your body to have a long runway so that your self-healing mechanisms can get rebuilt. And then you can actually have your body reverse the disease instead of the drugs or the surgery, which drugs and surgery never reverse disease anyway. So we had to buy this particular client some time. So he needed to, have the mass removed, and then he needed to have some chemo to slow down the aggression of this particular type of cancer. And so he did both simultaneously. Well, he sailed through the chemo. While his, peers in his cohort who were there getting treatment with him were suffering all of the side effects of having treatment. And he recovered so well that his oncologist in the next report, when he was officially given the cancer-free, diagnosis and said he was in full remission much earlier than the oncologist ever expected, said, the oncologist wrote, wow, you are a miracle. This is amazing. But of course, never came back to say, what is it that you did exactly? Like, tell me a little bit more about this, diet that you did and lifestyle changes. But anyway, so he's doing incredibly well and the family is forever grateful. But I have tons of stories like that where the medical teams have said that, don't change your diet, don't change your lifestyle because it has nothing to do with your disease. And my clients have gone on to prove them wrong, and many of them without doing any conventional treatment whatsoever.
Yeah, you know what? You say that. I mean, that whole story. I had so many of my own stories going on in my head, and what we hear all the time in our business is, well, it's just bad luck. And I'll say there is bad luck out there. And I also like the fact that you said, it's not your protocol versus chemo or conventional. Often it's both working together, which your client had a great outcome, which is a great story. And another thought that went off as you were speaking, and a gentleman we both know and idolize that kind of, I'll say in my world, kind of started me down this path was Colin Campbell. And if you read his book, that was one of the first books I read on plant-based nutrition. And I remember being in bed reading and saying to my wife, look at this. And it was the part where he was turning on and off cancer genes, literally turning them on and turning them off by dripping either like animal protein and then no animal protein. And it was basically turning on and off cancer genes. And I thought, man, that's pretty compelling evidence, right? So, yeah.
And the evidence is astounding. There's so much research out there. And unfortunately, physicians are too busy and Some will say they're not too busy, but I'll say, they're pretty busy and pretty exhausted at the end of the day. And I know the energy that it takes and the mindset that it takes to open up a journal article and read it from beginning to end to see, first of all, is it a well-designed study? Who funded it? Who did the research, who carried it out? It was a methodology done well. Was it analyzed well? So it does take time to read through medical journals. You can't just read the abstract, that's for sure. But the fact that so many physicians absolutely say there's no research out there, which is, couldn't be further from the truth. And just what you said about Dr. T. Colin Campbell turning cancer on and off, with, simply by adjusting the amount of protein in the Petri dishes and then doing the animal-based studies and so on. But the same applies to type 2 diabetes. There was a study done in 1923 that showed that you could create type 2 diabetes within 2 weeks in a healthy individual just by giving them animal-based fat.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Just animal-based fat. You fed it to them. And this was a group that was compared against another group of healthy individuals that also didn't have diabetes to start with, but they fed them loads and loads and loads of sugar, refined sugar, just tons of sugar. Could not create diabetes in them. But meanwhile, everybody thinks diabetes is caused by high sugar intake. No, it's not. When you have diabetes, that's when sugar becomes a problem, but not to create it and also not to reverse it. And so with the study, they flipped the two groups as well. And, and then they took the group that was eating tons of sugar, couldn't create diabetes in them, fed them high animal-based fat and protein. And sure enough, created diabetes within 2 weeks in these individuals, took them off the high animal-based fat diet, and then all of a sudden their diabetes went away. And so this is important to understand that the research has been there, it's always been there. And it doesn't matter how many more studies keep getting pumped out today in 2021 that still confirm what we knew 200 years ago. I mean, the thing is, we just need people to read the studies because it's available.
Yeah, and your comment about too much sugar creates diabetes. I mean, if you went and asked 10 people, do they think that's true? 10 out of 10 would say, yeah, that's true. Too much sugar creates diabetes, right? And you're exactly right. It's the animal, it's the fats, it's everything else. So yeah, it's a shame. And I'll just, one last thing that I'll just share about your book that I loved was the story about your daughter when she broke her, I believe it was her arm, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And she and I recognized the clinic she was in because I've been there myself a few times. But when I read the story again, I shared it with my wife Barb because exactly the same thing happened to me. I went where I shouldn't have gone a few years ago and ended up basically breaking my legs so I wouldn't die. I was basically catapulting out of bounds down the back of a glacier. And anyways, brain said, I got to stop. And to stop, I had to use my full body weight. Anyways, I fractured my ankle in a couple spots. Any event, similar story. It was like, they said, oh, you won't ski again. That was in February. You won't ski again this winter. And, and I ramp up my diet anyhow, but I ramped up my supplements and ramped up my healing and all, anything I could do to kind of help my body self-heal. And I think it was 4 or 5 weeks later. Well, first of all, I was out of my cast, walking, and the orthopedic surgeon kept saying, Kevin, you can't be out yet. Like you got to go back on your couches. And literally I was skiing, I'm going to say 5 weeks later. Right. So
That's
it just, and the reason I share that is your body wants to heal, right? It's like, let's give it things that will help it heal. Right. So, yeah.
And
So,
I just want to say about that too, the one part that I love about that story, especially about bones healing and ligaments and tendons, and I mean, all parts of the body healing, is that everybody's going out there and getting stem cell therapy treatment, right? So this is, activate the stem cells, transplant them into your body. And then the stem cells, which are, I'll call them a neutral cell. So they'll, turn into whatever you need it to turn into. So whether you need it to become, a new section of a ligament for a shoulder, or whether you need it to become a section of a muscle, or whether you need it to be, your body is so incredible at having these stem cells travel throughout your body and become whatever you need them to be. And so that's exactly what we're doing when we consume a plant-based, organic, nutrient-dense, whole food diet and lifestyle. Is we're activating our stem cells 24/7. So you're giving yourself stem cell treatment 24/7, and there's no roadblocks in the way. when we have these high animal fat, high protein diets, we throw in the alcohol, we throw in a lot of these refined foods that are processed and high in sodium, we're actually literally putting up roadblocks to your stem cells to be able to go in and rebuild your body. So what you just need to do is get the roadblocks out of the way and then let your body do what it's designed to do. And with my daughter in that study, it was quite remarkable because the doctor showed us an old x-ray that had been taken 3 weeks earlier and said, oh yeah, your daughter's not going to be able to do anything for a year. And I was like, well, we haven't had the new x-ray done. We've just been in here in the waiting room. And he's like, what? And so he said, okay, we'll go get the x-ray, but still it's standard 1 year before she could ever go back to gymnastics because she had one of the worst breaks they'd ever seen at Children's Hospital.
Wow.
And her entire radial head broke off of her forearm basically and slid down her arm. And so they put it back without pins. They weren't sure if it was going to take. And, the study had just started. And the fact that she healed within 3 weeks was remarkable, the fastest healing that they had ever seen. But the part that astounds me is that the research team came in and they had to actually disqualify us from the study because she was considered an outlier because she healed too fast. And then what even astounded me more than that is the fact that they didn't ask any questions.
Yeah.
I was like, don't you want,
what else did you do? Or what did you, yeah, for sure. Well, it's funny
Exactly.
you say that because I posted my protocol that I did, and anybody who breaks a bone, I just pull up that blog and send them to it. And it's people just, they adopt it. That's what, it's.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody can apply it. You don't need to have a medical degree to apply everything that we're talking about here.
For sure. Another, sorry, I keep we keep going down the rabbit hole here, but another book, as you were talking about healing, that I'm sure you've read, it's called Radical Remission.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
and Radical Remission. And again, anybody that has like a cancer situation, I think I buy this book for them. And Radical Remission is essentially, it was a doc, I believe, from Harvard that kept witnessing people with stage 4 cancer that would magically heal.
Yeah.
Right. And the community would just dismiss it. Oh, well, like your daughter, it's an outlier. Oh, well, we aren't really sure what happened, and kind of move on. And she kept seeing this over and over again. So she devoted her work to study, what do these people do differently than others that somehow heal? And, again, it's things you're talking about. It's mindfulness, it's stress, it's outdoors, it's food, it's nutrients, but another great book, one of my top go-to books for sure. I don't know if you've had a chance.
And I love that you brought it up because when you were speaking earlier, I was like, oh, that's Dr. Kelly Turner's book.
That's right. Exactly.
Radical Remission. So it came into my mind when we were chatting about, just the, how the body can spontaneously heal from things. And again, it's not that it's even spontaneous, it's just that all the roadblocks are gone, right? The stressors are gone from the body, the environmental stressors, the mental stressors, the physical stressors, the nutrient deficiency stressor, the toxicity stressor, all of those are roadblocks. And once you remove them all and you just let your body be, it is nature. It is designed to regrow, regenerate, repair. You just got to get out of its way. So that book, I recommend it to everybody as well. I'm glad that you brought that up.
Awesome. Good. So let's jump back to Green Moustache, because when you 7 or 8 years ago, if I go back, because that's probably about the same time I started my journey kind of down the path of plant-based. And probably the reason I love the place so much, first of all, I said, there's got to be a hippie that owns this place. So when I went in, but, and I was probably pretty close to it, but with no disrespect, of course.
Yeah.
But anyways, what prompted you to open that? And because I'll say you were ahead of your time when you did that.
Yeah, we were definitely ahead of our time. And I think we still are ahead of our time, actually, because, people are still, like we talked about earlier, trying to understand, what a plant-based whole food diet is, right? And we are the extreme. For us, we have coconut oil in our restaurant, and that's about the only refined product that we have. Like, we don't put any oils in our dressing. And even the coconut oil, we even tell our customers, like, for sure, eat our desserts. They're incredibly healthy. You can have them for breakfast, but I'm letting you know there's coconut oil in there. That is a refined product. The jury has just come in that consuming coconut oil is definitely not the best thing to do for your health. And I knew that 10 years ago. So we're trying to figure out, like, how do we make our desserts without coconut oil? Meanwhile, the rest of the world is just trying to figure out how to make their desserts without refined flour and refined
Yeah.
sugar.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, and there's, when we first opened, there were, not even a handful of restaurants that I could go eat at. Now, there would say, there's probably about good 10 restaurants I would, refer people to in Vancouver. In Whistler, we're still about one of the only ones. And so ahead of our time for sure. But what prompted me to open it is when I started learning about this therapy back in like 2006, I guess. And I went to San Diego. I got trained in the therapy. It took almost a year of training and got certified. And then I was working in government still at the time, and I was doing environmental policy work. And the HR coordinator said, Nikki, you've been talking a lot about this food is medicine thing and that you can reverse, chronic diseases. Would you be willing to teach our staff as part of a health and safety week? So I did, and I put together this workshop. And it was about 45 minutes long. I ended up speaking for an hour and a half because everybody just had so many questions. And I didn't really know what I was talking about because I still hadn't gone back to school yet and did my pre-med courses. So learning about this therapy prompted me to want to become a doctor and go study all my sciences and write my MCAT. And I started applying for med school right at the same time when I opened the Green Moustache. And so I gave this workshop for the municipality. We had 400 employees there. And they took it all in, and they left after this workshop and started applying what I was teaching them. And so
Wow.
and then a few months later, one person came back and they're like, my psoriasis completely reversed. Another person said their type 2 diabetes completely reversed. Another person who had celiac disease, you don't reverse celiac disease, but all of his symptoms completely vanish. No more bloating, no more migraines. Another woman out of finance, she had severe migraines most days of the month. No more migraines anymore. And then people started telling me how they inspired their parents, because once they healed, their parents want to know, and one person I worked with, her mom at 72 had a very advanced osteoarthritis. The dad had very advanced heart disease. Both of them in their 70s reversed their diseases. So I knew I was onto something, and I almost had to do this to prove to myself that the Gerson therapy was legit. Because of course, anytime you learn something for the first time, you're going to be skeptical. And I was highly, highly skeptical. That's my nature. So I took on 19 clients after that for free. And I said, I'm just going to teach this to you. Let's just see what happens. It was a little experiment. And sure enough, all of these 19 clients started to reverse their diseases. And I wasn't even a medical doctor, and I'm teaching this. And it was so easy to teach them and so easy for them to engage in the behavior changes that were necessary. So then all of a sudden, everybody in Whistler, because Whistler's a small town, started coming to me without any marketing. It was all word of mouth. And then I started having people from Florida call and Mexico call. And because Whistler being a town that gets, 3 million visitors a year, everybody has friends everywhere. So I started getting all of these clients from Australia. But then they all started asking me for one thing. And that was if I would make the food for them. Because it
Huh.
takes work, right? To
Yep,
be
for
in your
sure.
kitchen, to do the grocery
Oh, for
shopping,
sure.
wash it,
Yep.
it takes time, takes some energy. So they started to ask me. And so I was actually, I don't even remember how many months pregnant I was with my third daughter, but I used to wake up in the morning at like 6 a.m. I had bought a Norwalk juicer. It was in my tiny little apartment where we were living with our au pair, 2-bedroom apartment, 2 kids, one on the way, and an au pair, and my husband, all living in this 2-bedroom. In Whistler, it's what you do. And the au pair would wake up at 6 a.m. and we would scrub vegetables. We would sanitize the kitchen. We'd make this juice. And I would start delivering juices to restaurants and clients. And after a few weeks of that, I was burnt out, like completely burnt out from doing that. But I still knew that there was a need to have the juices made and the food made for people. And that's really where the concept for the Green Moustache was born.
Cool. And obviously it took off right away. And then you've opened, how many
Yeah.
locations are you up to now?
Yeah, so we have 5 locations. One did not survive COVID. Really, it was just there was a number of factors there that the franchisee, she just wasn't able to open it again afterwards. So that was unfortunate. So we have 4 locations that are currently open and running and busy. And then we have 10 more locations set to open in New York.
Holy smokes.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah. And New York is, we've got a daughter that lives down there. And of course she's plant-based, and, it's New York is very progressive. Like
Mhm.
there are a lot of plant-based options down there. I find even to go to dining, it's really simple. When
Yeah.
you go for dinner. So yeah, that's good for you. That's amazing.
Exactly. Yeah. And the one thing I'll have to say about New York, though, I was just there in March last year, just before COVID hit, and I was teaching a group of healthcare workers all about the Eat Real to Heal program so that they could teach their patients. And I did go to almost 29 different vegetarian healthy restaurants that I, had to Google through TripAdvisor. And I didn't find a ton that were even close to what our standards are, or the Eat Real to Heal standards, or the Green Moustache standards. And again, it's because while there's a lot of places that say they're plant-based or vegan or vegetarian or healthy, many of them still had, deep fried falafel, and many of them still had, a lot of, animal-based sauces, so like the eggs are still considered vegetarian, and a lot of them were using iceberg lettuce instead of all the beautiful, deep, rich, leafy greens. And the abundance of, for example, lots of heavy on the breads and a little bit of vegetables, whereas our ratio is you get like pretty much 95 to 99% vegetables and then a little bit of grains thrown in there. And, and it's, so that's what I found about New York. So I still think that we're going to be ahead of the time in New York for the next little while, unless somebody listens to this podcast and manages to open up something like ours down there.
Or now you're going to get requests to open them right across Canada and the US, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that would be awesome.
So let me ask you about your 22 Million Strong campaign, because I know that's an initiative that you're super passionate about. Well, you're passionate about everything, but I think this is your what I call a BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal.
Yeah.
So can you just share that and let our listeners know what that's all about?
Yeah, so it definitely is a big, hairy, audacious goal. There's no doubt about that. So it was actually inspired by two individuals. And one is my great, great, great grandmother in Africa. When she was 9 years old, she was standing in a slave trade lineup on I think it was the west coast of Malawi, set to be put on a boat to cross Lake Malawi, then to head to the eastern seaboard to be put on a Arabic ship and to be sent off as a slave. And when she was 9 years old, she walked away, just turned around, walked away, pivoted, left the lineup, and she walked hundreds of miles and ended up in Chirzulu, a little tiny town in Malawi, where my great, 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 great grandparents adopted her as their own, this little lost stray girl. And then eventually down through the lineage, I was born in this town before coming to Canada. So I've always been inspired by that story of using your feet, using your own body power to transport you over long distances. And so I had made many, many plans and trips to, ride my bike to Mexico and kayak the Baffin Islands. And it was always in service of, raising funds for a nonprofit. And, but I met my husband. Another time I got pregnant. So a lot of these trips were canceled. So I've always wanted to travel a long distance. And then, of course, Rich Roll is the other individual. So in listening to a lot of his podcasts, you hear about these endurance athletes that, go these extra long distances. And many of them were just doing it for their own personal will and endeavor and goal to see if they could get themselves that distance. And so I actually wrote to Rich Roll one day and never heard back from him. But, I was jokingly said, like, do I have to run or bike to California just to get on your podcast? Like, what is it going to take? And that actually planted the seed. So before COVID, the plan was to actually run and ride to California and show up at Rich's doorstep like a crazy lady to say, listen, we're doing such great work here. We're reversing chronic disease. Definitely put us on your podcast. You need to talk about the Gerson therapy to your audience, because he's got like 35 million, listeners or downloads. Like he's a huge presence.
Yeah.
And, Charlotte Gerson had been on Oprah not once, but twice actually to, share the message about the Gerson therapy. And it really helped them get traction. Despite the fact that Oprah then had to undergo massive lawsuits from the meat industry after having Charlotte Gerson on the show, but that's another story. But then COVID hit, so we couldn't go across the border to do the trip. So that's when I decided, and our team decided, well, what if we went from the West Coast to the East Coast of Canada? So it only increased the distance threefold to 7,200 kilometers. And I called my university because I am doing my PhD. And when COVID hit, I said, you know what? I've got a lot on my plate with trying to save our businesses, deal with COVID, homeschool 3 kids now because all the schools were shut down. I'm planning this massive bike trip and running trip, and they said basically like, hold on, Nikki, why don't you just combine everything and turn my PhD research into 22 Million Strong? And so that's how 22 Million Strong came to be. And as I bike and run across the country, I'll be meeting with communities across the country, BIPOC communities, and BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. Communities, remote and rural, to really understand what are the barriers to accessing the clean, real, fresh foods that you and I talk about that are required to be able to reverse chronic diseases, because many of these communities don't even have access to a banana in their communities. And if they do, they have to buy it from a gas station. And most of the food that they're eating comes from gas stations. Or it's just really expensive to import the produce that they need. So I really want to uncover those barriers as part of my PhD research, but also get healthy at the same time and use my human powered abilities to get me across the country.
Awesome. So that trip has now been postponed till next year, right? So what are the dates for that? Or is it
Yes. So, yeah, the massive trip across Canada has been postponed till 2022 and
22?
will most likely leave in July, so July 1st. And this year, because we have major sponsors like Solomon and Lululemon and Guayaki, Yerba Mate, and Blended for You, and et cetera, et cetera. And so we still wanted to honor the sponsorship. So we've extended the sponsorship now over 2 years, but we're going to do a mini tour, and a mini tour is 3,500 kilometers. And we'll do that just in BC. And so if we can't even leave our communities, because right now we are on, major restrictions, we're not even supposed to leave our immediate community. And if it's still like that on July 22nd of this year, then I'll be doing 3,500 kilometers up and down the Sea to Sky Highway and all around Pemberton and Whistler. So,
Wow, holy
yeah.
smokes. Well, good luck with that. And hopefully we're turning the corner and things are opening up, and hopefully you can do all of BC, which I like how you say my mini trip, and it's still like 3,500 kilometers. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So let me ask you about that. First of all, congratulations on that initiative. That's amazing. And I love the fact you're doing something healthy for yourself, but you're also using it as a cause to support a cause or causes out in the community, which is awesome. But so to do that, you've obviously been training a bit. So talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, it's the training part. So let me back up, because what a lot of people probably don't realize is prior to last year, which would have been July 2020.
20.
So we're in the middle of COVID. Prior to that, I had probably run in the last 16 years a total of maybe 20 kilometers in the entire 16 years. And I couldn't even run 100 meters without being out of breath and feeling like my lungs and my heart were gonna, fall out of me and get crushed on the road. So that is just important for people to know. So when I started looking for someone to train me in running and biking, I decided to go to the best of the best, but I also wanted somebody who knew about zone 2 training. And of course, that person happens to be Rich Roll's coach, Chris Hout. And so I called him up and I said, I want to run and bike across Canada at 7,200 kilometers. I want to do essentially 100 kilometers a day for 75 days. Would you be willing to take me on? And right away he was like, okay, how much running have you done? And I told him, and he was, I could just imagine him on the other end of the phone, being like, this woman is crazy. But I explained to him that, once I commit to something, I commit to it. I used to be an athlete in my former life. I used to play tennis in the States on a scholarship. I used to play basketball and volleyball, rock climb, everything. So prior to having kids, I was fit. And since having kids, not so fit. And that was really because I love the work that I do. And I was just so committed to helping my clients, which requires sitting down and being on my computer or consulting. So it wasn't that I was necessarily lazy, but, I just didn't prioritize movement. And so I hired Chris Hout and he got me on a program. And the program started off with, just really short runs at a very slow pace in zone 2, just keeping my heart rate between 125 and 135. And then it was amazing because within a few weeks, I was, biking and running quite long distances. So anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour and a half. And then we quickly went up to, having 5-hour biking days followed by a 10K run, which is pretty typical for me. So yeah, so it's been
Yeah, well,
incredible.
that's amazing because he is, again, without meeting, we're kind of in the same circles. So if there's any coach, I'd say he is the coach. So, and I love
Yeah.
his whole Z2 training philosophy. I mean, it worked for Rich when he did his ultra Ironmans, right, in the Hawaiian Islands. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Works for Scott Jurek, works for really all of these athletes. And what's been beautiful is over the past, it's been, not quite a year, but it's been nice to see my heart rate threshold, change considerably. So now I can run faster and further, even though I'm still in Z2. So, physiologically, you get to see your muscles change. You get to feel your heart muscle and your lungs change. And it was just, I have to say, it's not easy by any means. I think the hardest part is getting my shoes on in the morning and trying to get all my running and bike gear together. Like that actually is, ends up being where all the work is. But then once you're out there, it's beautiful because 80% of your training is spent in Z2 and only 20% of it is spent in Z3 and Z4. And so, which really means that any human on the planet can do this.
Yes.
It doesn't
Yes.
matter if you're obese. It doesn't matter if you have never run a day in your life. And we have about 160 people now that have joined our 22 million strong training team. And they write in all the time. And, many of them have never even done more than 1 hour of yoga classes, exercise in their entire life. Some of them have never walked a kilometer in their life. And now they're out there walking or running, 40 to 50 kilometers a week and biking, every single day. It's been really fun to watch that it truly, anybody can do this, what I've done.
So, when I hear you speak, I just go, you're creating movements in everything you do. You create movement in the food and nutrition. Now you're creating movement in people that have never exercised or done any day-to-day activity are now following you that. So again, hats off to you, Nicolette. Like it's amazing
Thank
what you're
you.
doing. Yeah, for sure. Let me, big picture. What do you think we need to do as a country to be healthier? And I'll just preface that by saying, one of the things that I pay attention to are statistics on
Mhm.
obesity, on diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular disease. And you think as a society, with all we do know about health and nutrition and what we should be consuming on a daily basis, you would think we would be improving as a society, but it's actually going the reverse. I mean, diabetes levels
Yeah.
are increasing, cardiovascular disease is increasing. So what do you think as a society? I mean, if someone's listening to this, and hopefully someone gets the message, that what do you think we need to do to change that, to shift the momentum?
Yeah, one of the things that we absolutely have to do is we need citizens who are scientifically literate. So this includes the plant-based physicians in Canada. This includes any nutritionist, healthcare workers that understand the science that it exists and can analyze it. We need them to all get together and write to our federal, provincial, and municipal governments to get them to look at the science. Because right now, for example, we have the Public Health Agency of Canada that is holding $22 million in funding to manage diabetes. And I just had a conversation with them a few weeks ago and asking about, how can we access some of this funding? We work in diabetes reversal, and it takes us 7 days to 30 days to fully reverse somebody's diabetes. That means diagnostically reverse. So their A1C levels have dropped, their hemoglobin has increased, their red blood cell count has increased. Like this is diagnostically tested. Their glucose does not shoot up past 5.4, 5.6 when they eat sugary foods, high glucose foods. Like this is full reversal of the disease. They're off their medications. And I said, so how can we access some of that funding? And she just said, if you use the word diabetes reversal, we cannot give you the money. It has to be diabetes management. And diabetes management, according to our Canadian government, means that we take people who are pre-diabetic and diabetic, and they go to the doctor's office, they get diagnosed, and they get put on medications. That is the Canadian government's definition of management. It is not about getting people off their medications. And I've been in so many meetings with, academics and scientists and researchers and public health officials and politicians over the years, who all want to tackle the diabetes epidemic. And none of these organizations and individuals had food as part of their programming.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And it was get people exercising more. Sure, that's great. But I can tell you, if you take somebody who is obese, who is overweight, and you make them exercise and you do not have them change their diet, you might be able to, help them lose weight, but they'll just gain the weight right back if the minute they stop exercising, but they will not change their arterial walls and structures, their heart, their lungs, their organs, their blood quality at all. It would still be laden with arterial plaque and they will still have diabetes. So you cannot have somebody exercise out of a bad diet. It's just not possible. And so we need to completely shift the understanding of the policyholders, who are not always the scientists, right? So these bodies they often outsource the science to other agencies. And so if we have a scientific body that's saying that sugar causes diabetes, which is currently what is happening at the federal level, then we will never reverse diabetes. So that's the first thing that we absolutely need to have happen. Then the second thing we need to have happen is we need to have policy created where every student across Canada at the elementary school level, at the high school level, and at the post-secondary school level, they get to learn about what the true cause and nature of disease is. And then they're taught how to cook food, how to grow food, how to prepare foods, how to share food, how to eat in community, because we know that that's really important as well. So they need to be educated about this, because really the kids, we should be thinking like the tobacco industry did 30 years ago, that what is the best way to create a smoker? Well, what is the best way to create a healthy person? You get them when they're 9, 10, 11 years old. And that's exactly what the smoking industry did. They marketed to 9, 10, and 11-year-olds to make sure that they could secure their next audience. And we need to do the same thing when it comes to whole food, healthy eating as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And, if I think of what the movement you're trying to create, makes me think of Dr. Michael Clapper, who is, his theory is we've got to get to the docs, right? So his whole program is getting to the docs and educating the docs. And to your point, where he really spends a lot of his time are docs in med school, right? Yeah. So that they can, so he can kind of convert them and get them thinking, the importance of plant-based nutrition and right nutrition and whole foods and everything else, and how it can reverse disease and stop disease in its tracks, right? So yeah. Any comments on that? Like, you've mentioned going to the young, and also government or policy. How about the medical community?
Yeah, that's my biggest, hairiest, most audacious goal is to eventually change the medical school curriculum. And so as part of 22 Million Strong, we have 3 audiences. So that's youth, it's physicians and healthcare workers, and then it's Indigenous and Black and people of color communities. And that's because our BIPOC communities, they have been the most repressed, oppressed, depressed, group of citizens of the planet. And it's important that as part of our reconciliation work that we're actually, helping these communities, not to teach them, because in fact, Indigenous members from all over the planet, they know food is medicine. It literally, they're survived, millions of years using food as medicine, and as fuel and as energy and as healing. So they already know this. So I like to say, instead of teaching them about food as medicine, it's actually just to help them remember. So youth we talked about, and then yes, our third audience is physicians and healthcare workers. And you're absolutely absolutely right. We need to get the medical school students, we need to somehow give them access to this information, because it's not through their curriculum. Medical schools across North America, they're not increasing their nutritional training. They're actually decreasing the amount of, not hours, but minutes that medical school students get currently. And so we need to somehow get them that information. And it's scary for them as well, because they end up with so much debt when they become a physician. And so in Canada, it's really tough actually, because they're so beholden to our beautiful, I love Tommy Douglas, I love our socialized care system, but it's kind of let Canadians be complacent when it comes to their health, because they'll just say, well, my doctor, it's free, I can go anytime, I'll let the doctor tell me what to do, and the doctor will most likely diagnose and prescribe. And so that means prescribing a medication versus any other form of alternative treatment. And right now, food is considered alternative treatment. So if we can teach our medical school students how to develop a practice based around lifestyle medicine, so that when they graduate, they know how to educate their clients in a 7.5-minute appointment, because that's all they have. So if we can help them get access to the science, as well as get access to how to counsel a patient when they're in their office, then we can flip the whole entire medical system on its head.
Yeah, for sure. It reminds me of the doc. The prescription should be nutrition, right? That should
Yeah.
be the prescription. So I think I've shared with you my story. I mean, I was one of those people. I mean, I thought I could exercise my way out of anything. Didn't matter what I ate, how I slept, stress. I just thought, you know what? I work out every day. I'm good. And ended up doing my medical, and I had high blood pressure, high cholesterol. I was overweight, and I had pre-diabetic, and the doc pulled out his script pad to put me on scripts, and he basically said, Kev, you're getting older. And that's what really prompted my whole journey down the nutrition and plant whole food plant-based diet. Was that was a turning point, right? I said, I'm not going on scripts. And literally within a month, you said a week, I went back in a month. And I remember him saying to me, he said, Kev, he says, you've been abusing your body for years. It's not going to change overnight. And then he did my blood tests, and he actually called me up and said, you're my star patient, right? Because it happened so quickly. But yeah, the body, as we said when we started out, I mean, it wants to heal. Just let it heal. Feed it the right
100%.
foods, right? Yeah.
100%. And I've done the same thing with myself, where I didn't exercise myself to death, which you almost did that when you ran that marathon, and then, ended up in a coma. And everybody needs to read your book, because your book it's again, such an easy book to read. Your stories are so personal and they hit home. And I know, especially for a lot of men out there, I think it's a brilliant book because it's so relatable, and women too. I mean, I absolutely loved it. And I should say any gender should absolutely read your
Yes.
book.
Yes.
And but one of the things is, for myself, I worked myself almost to death several years ago, after starting the first, I think it was by the third Green Moustache we had up and running. And my husband was teaching full time. I had the 3 kids, and and I basically was forgetting to eat. So even though I ate well, I was just not eating even close to enough. I was probably about a third of my caloric intake, which means that if you don't have nutrients, you're eventually depleting your body. So I ended up depleting my heart, and to the point where I was getting heart arrhythmias. My thyroid was out of whack. I was, verge of an autoimmune disorder. My skin was super sensitive and fiery to touch. And I was just basically in pain from head to toe. And it took me a year before I went in and had my blood work done. And then when I did, the doctors called me back. They were like, get in here right now. And so I headed back to the doctors, and they basically said, Nikki, if you do not start eating the food that you talk about to all your patients, because, my clients, their patients, they said, you're going to have a heart attack, any day now. And so, and so I said, okay, no medications. And they kind of laughed. They're like, we kind of know you're not going to take any medications. So I called in sick to my own company for 30 days. And I just told my staff, you're going to have to run the businesses on your own, figure it out. I'm not going to be able to even do anything for you. And I just did the full Gerson therapy for 2 weeks, or for a month, 30 days. And within 6 days, I went back for my blood work. All my heart arrhythmias were gone. I felt night and day difference. My skin was not fiery to touch. I had no pain from head to toe, and I just did the therapy for 30 days. And of course, all my, I had through the roof inflammation markers. Those were gone after 6 days, and basically turned my health around as well. So I can relate. I've been there. Your body is amazing though, and you have to 100% believe that your body is capable of turning itself around 180 degrees. Anybody can do it. So your book explains how you could do it. My book explains how to do it. And all of the doctors and physicians that you talked about today, they're all brilliant. They all teach you how to do it. So, choose one book, read it, and just start implementing what it says, and your life will be different.
Yeah, awesome. Great closing advice there. Yeah, awesome. Nicolette, we're going to put in the notes how people can get a hold of you, because I know a lot of our listeners will be sending us emails and everything else. So we'll make sure we put all the connections in there. But very simply, can you just share what the best way for people to get a hold of you or your organization would be?
Yeah, if you go to nicolettericher.com, so that's Nicolette, Richer, but pronounced Richer, so RICHER.com. You'll get access to all of our companies, the Green Moustache, 22 Million Strong, Richer Health, our nonprofit, Sea to Sky Thrivers Society. If anybody wants to participate in 22 Million Strong, I would definitely get in touch with us. You can also go to our Facebook site, which is the 22 Million Strong training team, where I give everybody access to my nutrition program through the University of Toronto and through my training program through Chris Hout. So you can actually see and follow my exact training program on both the physical and nutrition side. So that's another great way to reach out to us and message us through there. And just learn about everything that we're doing. We do have an exciting new program that we're launching for June 1st, and that's called Get Off Your Fat Ass. Am I allowed to say that on the show?
Yes, of course.
Great. And it's called Get Off Your Fat Ass, but fat being FAAT, which means fabulous, audacious, but also maybe a little bit apathetic, but also terrific ass. We know that it doesn't matter, what shape or size it is. It doesn't matter if you've ever exercised before a day in your life, or if you're eating well or not eating well. It's a 6-week program to basically, hang out with me for a couple hours each week. And then I'm going to get you moving that beautiful butt of yours and eating well. And, in 6 weeks, you could be out there doing, an incredible 5K run, 1K run, bike, yoga, whatever it is, the activity that you want to be doing. We're going to get you there, but also getting your energy levels up, getting rid of the pain in your body, and just helping you feel well, because you can turn your health around, your life around in as little as 6 weeks.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I think that's a great way to end off the show. Thank you again, Nikki, so much for joining us. And I know we skimmed a bunch of topics, so I'd love to have you back on a future episode at some point, and we can dive a bit deeper, rabbit hole some of those items. But again, listeners, in the show notes, we will have all the connections to Nicolette. And one thing I would say is please get her book, Eat Real to Heal. It's a great book, easy read, and a game changer as well. So I'd encourage you, if there's one step you're going to take, that would be a great step. So Nikki, on behalf of myself and all of our listeners, I just want to thank you so much. You're changing yourself, you've changed yourself, you've changed your family. Then you moved to community, through Green Moustache and others, and then Canada. And now, by the sounds of it, you're changing the world. So hats off to you. You're doing an amazing job, and I love everything you're doing.
Thank you, Kevin. And, right back at you as well, because it really does take, a group of committed citizens to make all of this incredible change happen. So I just love that, I get to play in this game with you at this particular time in history, and love everything that you're doing at Advica Health and through your book and through your podcast. So thanks for starting this podcast. Can't wait to listen to all the shows.
Great. Thanks, Nicolette. Have a great evening, because I know you're going out for a run or a ride right now.
Both. Yep. Going to head out now.
There you go. Awesome.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Nicolette. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.